Hey, Jack.
Hey, Trevor, how are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome back to another episode of Hey, Jack, Leadership Reflections with Jack Nalig. And today, Jack, we have a very special guest with us, the actual first guest on the Hey, Jack podcast.
Super.
Would you like to introduce our guest for us?
I would love to. So, first of all, today we have with us Beth Correll, and she's a seasoned supply chain and finance leader recently retired from the Hershey Company after a distinguished 26-year career. Fueled by her passion for coaching, mentoring, and developing high performing teams, she founded Step Function Coaching, an organization dedicated to helping mid level professionals land the roles they should have had by now. Beth began her career in 1998 as an industrial engineer, collaborating across supply chain and commercial teams on financial analysis, continuous improvement initiatives, and capital investment decisions. She transitioned into global procurement, where she spent 9 years in leadership roles overseeing major spend categories, including media and advertising, commodities, and packaging materials. In 2018, Beth joined Hershey's global finance team, where she led commercial and finance in US FP&A. She concluded her tenure by spearheading the company's global finance transformation, leveraging continuous improvement and change management strategies to drive improvement across people, processes, and systems. Beth holds a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering from West Virginia University, where she remains actively involved as a member of the Industrial Engineering Visiting Committee and a Distinguished Alumni Academy. So excited to welcome Beth to our podcast. Hey, Beth, how are you?
Hey Jack, great to be here.
So excited to have you.
Yes, this is great to have you here, Beth. That just hearing that bio got me excited. There are a lot of insights and reflections that we can unpack here. So, Jack, what is the first thing here? Where should we start with Beth? Because we could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, well, I think we ought to start where we should start, which is let's let Beth have the mic and tell everybody a little bit about herself, establish her credibility here, and overview her career for everybody a little better than I did.
Well, you read it with such enthusiasm. It made it sound maybe a little more exciting than it always was. But yeah, so let me just say it in my words, a little bit about my career journey. And it's been a journey. I mean, it has definitely been atypical from someone with an engineering background. So as you said, I do have that degree in industrial engineering, which for those who don't know what industrial engineering is, it's the most financially oriented of the different engineering disciplines. I think of it as like a combination of engineering, all the mechanics and the math stuff, science and math, coupled with supply chain and an MBA, all put into a 4-year engineering degree. So it's really a great foundation for like all of these roles that I've had that have had me jumping across supply chain and finance. So I played that role of industrial engineer for about 15 years of my career. And in that role, I was never the expert. So it led to a lot of development needs and opportunities and really learning to ask great questions. About 15 years in, I knew I couldn't stay there forever and started asking around and having meetings in the organization to see where I might be able to land next. And procurement was where I landed, which I absolutely loved. They were growing from and going through a transformation from like traditional buying to more strategic sourcing, getting into that media and advertising space, which was just really unique and kind of a fun place to break through with a procurement organization. So I kind of climbed the ranks there, moved from indirect procurement into commodities, which was a whole different world, and then packaging procurement and contract manufacturing. And then had the opportunity as a part of my development goals to enter the finance organization. Had a great segue of starting to lead a program that was called the Gross Margin Improvement Program. And so all of my background and experience led me perfectly to kind of this one opportunity that was maybe half created with me in mind, but also could have been someone else. And so I stepped into that role, got into finance, had to learn everything about the P&L. I mean, I knew cost of goods, but I did not know from top to bottom. So huge learning. And then, what's that?
Big time.
Big time learning. And then one of my colleagues resigned who led commercial finance, and I was asked to step into that role, which I remember when my leader told me that that was about to happen, and I think my knees literally buckled in his office, and I said, "There's no way." And he said, "Yes, you'll be fine. I have no worries." And
Awesome.
those are the kind of leaders and mentors you need. And I did it, and it was amazing. Also led US FP&A. And then for my final 3+ years, I led the global finance transformation, which was just what a great way to go out, because it was so much fun. Continuous improvement across people, especially, but also systems and processes, and really got to help move the organization forward. And
Awesome.
yeah, then I retired from Hershey.
So that's a great overview. And what I think we want to share now is, when we conceived of our guests coming to Hey Jack, we thought about having them focus on one of the pillars that we've already covered, and offer more perspective, or their perspective, on the pillar that we've chosen. So you could probably have guessed which pillar that is for Beth, and it's the one that we call developmentor, where you are actively involved in the development of yourself and others, and you mentor people, or are also mentored yourself. So developmentor was this word we created, and I know Beth's heard the episode and understands what we're trying to accomplish. But what we thought we would do is maybe have Beth reflect on the developmentor piece of leadership. So let's start, maybe, Beth, with the development side, and maybe have you reflect on how you developed yourself and how development happened for you in your career.
Yeah. Well, you heard my story. And so development for me, when I reflect back on it, I would say at least 80% of it happened on the job, right? Just very naturally and organically, as I took new roles and went into new spaces that I had to learn about. And 20% of it was more intentional and thoughtful. And I tend to learn really well in small bursts. So I love this podcast world. I do a lot of learning via podcasts and books as well. I like to listen to books so that I can do other things. I'm always multitasking, or trying to. But I tend to approach my development from an experience mindset, rather than like a next job mindset. So in other words, I think about, well, what are the experiences that I need to get, or that I need to be working on? And what is it that I need to do to get that? Not, well, if I want to be a senior manager of procurement, what do I have to do to be a senior manager? It's not that clear. It's more about, well, I want to lead a bigger team, or I need more experience presenting to executives. So that's a great example, like executive communication. Well, how do you get that? You make up reasons to get it. And so those are the kinds of things that I did with my leaders, and sometimes by myself. Is just, you put yourself in a situation where you can get the experiences that you need in order to develop and grow. Does that make sense?
It does. And at Hershey, did they have leadership development training and programs you could participate in?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there was a learning management system, and there were courses that we could sign up for as a part of just working there. We had access to the full LinkedIn learning library. And then there were sometimes I got creative. I had a lot of relationships with consultants because of my sourcing days, and then just because I was moving up in the ranks, and there were times that I had to hire them or was on projects with them. And I really leveraged those relationships, because they have just all consultants have an enormous library of learning materials. And so sometimes I would ask for a favor and have them come in for a lunch and learn, or just pick their brains on something that I needed. So yeah, there were lots of resources.
Awesome. And then how about your involvement in the development of your people? Okay, that's your training and development. As you became a leader, reflect on how much you were involved with your people, what role they took, what role you took, some of the tricks and games that you had to play to help develop your people.
Yeah, again, we would take it back to their experiences and talk about, in our career conversations, we would talk about, what is it that you want next in your career, and how do we get that for you?
Yeah.
So it was very targeted in that way because those conversations can be super awkward. And a lot of people avoid them altogether because they just don't know. They don't know what they want to do next precisely or whatever. So I never shied away from those hard conversations or, and I framed things up in a way that really tapped into what it was specifically that they needed to get out of this role before they could move on to the next role. And those were the things we would target.
Sort of career guidance at the end of performance review time, that kind of thing, or just ad hoc?
Just ad hoc. Constantly. I mean, you know how it is when you have feedback for someone or there's a learning opportunity, you want to do that in the moment, right? Or right after it happens. And so that's the way that I tended to approach things.
And there always was a couple of employees, right, that they were pushing hard and coming to you and you didn't have to think about going to them, right?
Yeah, of course. Of course. Sometimes they were coming to me more often than I had something to share, but yeah, that's okay too. We would always find, something for them to work on.
You bet. All right. Well, fantastic. So that's the development side. So let's think about mentorship. And you, I think even in your introduction, hinted you had a mentor or two. So let's talk about your experience with mentorship, what you benefited, how you benefited from it, and how that all came about, maybe at Hershey. And then second of all, why don't you follow up with your involvement as a mentor, right?
I have had some incredible leaders who have really been my mentors even after I moved on and they weren't my direct line leader anymore. I would say they were the most influential leaders and mentors in my life. But outside of that, for the ones you have to work for, right? Like if you're not lucky enough to have that amazing leader that advocates for you as well, I tended to lean a little more heavily toward peer mentors. So I would search for higher level mentors who I had a connection with. You know that when you try to assign, Hershey had a program, and I know others do it as well, where you can be assigned a mentor.
Right.
It's very forced and sometimes hard. Hopefully it clicks and something works out, but I would try to find someone that I had a really good connection with and work it into a long-term casual mentoring relationship.
Right.
Not like, hey, let's meet every month and then I have to be prepared and maybe I don't have anything this month. It was more like, I'm going to come to you when I need you, but I know I have that. I know that I have you when I need you. And I always tried to reciprocate too. Like, and by the way, I'm going to come to you when I have something that might help you or your team or something that I want you to be thinking about because I learned it from my network. So that worked out really well, but I also leaned into that peer mentor, my peers and the folks who you're even more comfortable like developing those relationships with, because those are the people who can be really honest with you. They really see you in action more often. You're looking out for each other. You're lifting each other up. You can be super honest about asking for things and help, and even just like, hey, I have a big presentation coming up. Can I do a dry run on you?
Yeah.
It's 15 minutes, but I need you to watch me. And I'd get so much goodness out of those.
Yeah, I'll bet you felt on the peer, well, maybe you didn't feel this, but in the peer mentorship, I think I'm with you. There's some of the richest mentorship relationships. And while you were initiating those and you were making them come to life, the other individual was getting as much out of it as you were.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you were doing it to help learn and be better. But by you doing that at the peer-to-peer level, they're accepting the reverse. They're accepting the holy crap, I can learn a ton from Beth. She's just taught me some things in her quest to learn from me. So you get that knitting of the two of you together, I think, in the peer level. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And then side note, you have all these relationships across the company because they're not in your department, right? They're maybe people you met in cross-functional projects or people you walk in with at the same time every day or whatever. And so now you've got connections that are super deep, sprinkled all over the company, and then that makes you more effective in your day job.
And your career with the way you took on different roles. And in our episode on Developmental, I talk about that, trying to go take a lateral kind of role into another area. That develops you so much better than any training class you could ever take. When you have to take on a function you don't know much about, you just go hard at it, and then you seek out mentors to make sure you're doing it right. And that's what you said earlier, and it really hit home to me, that that's the best way to have mentorship is those sideways experiences.
Yeah, for sure. They were incredible.
You bet.
Exhausting, but incredible. Yeah.
And I think, Beth, you said something that resonated with me, which was you actively sought these out. And what I've found in my career was that when you seek them out, you get this authenticity versus that forced nature where you, like you said, you meet once a month, and then the mentor in that case feels obligated to share something that might not even be relevant because they have to come prepared for this meeting. And I've always found that it doesn't have to seem like this big thing. It's very much just talking to peers. And Jack, you alluded to this on a previous episode where you can take the good and the bad that you like from a fellow leader. And when you just are networking, I think there's a lot to be learned there. And people don't realize that is development, and you're learning from others. And even though it seems informal and there's not a formal wrapper around it, you're still learning and you're developing yourself. And so I love that, you had alluded to that, and it doesn't feel forced that way. And then it becomes more enjoyable for everybody.
Yeah, I don't know if you did this too, Beth. Why don't you comment on this? I called it leadership stalking in the developmental. And what I loved about it is the other people didn't even know I was learning from them.
Yeah.
I would just admire them, or in the case of maybe a bad leader that I didn't think was a good leader, I would stare at them and try to figure out that goodness in them that I could take. So I did mentorship in a leadership stalking way, different than just having a mentor or even verbalizing the mentorship. Did you do any of that sort of thing? Just watch people?
Totally. I laughed at that when you said it, and I wrote it down because I'm like, oh, it's so accurate. Like, we're always just observing and learning, and then there are those certain leaders that you just are like a sponge around because you just want to learn so much from them.
You bet.
There's another thing that I did with those kinds of leaders, and it's a little corny maybe, but I think they really appreciated it. You know this, Jack. Once you get to be a certain level, people are not giving you feedback. Like,
no,
you don't get feedback. And so I would write for those people that I just truly admired and thought they were amazing. I would write them a card. But now, if you're not in the office, you could send an email or a chat or whatever. But I would actually write a card for them and leave it on their desk and just say, I think you're incredible. I love the way you handled that situation, or the way that you come at problems. You're always so calm and you always get the best out of everyone, or whatever. And they were so grateful, and like it touched them, right? I mean, nobody tells them this anymore. They're a VP. Nobody's telling them they're doing a good job in a meeting. But I wanted them to know that we were looking up to them. So it's nice.
What another great example of the positivity thing. It's just one of those little drops in the bucket can make
that's what I was thinking.
And the other thing I love about when you said that, and I used to do that, I would go to somebody and say, you did this so well. Thank you so much. It's awesome. All you're doing, you're helping knit the strength of the overall leadership. That simple pat on the back, which you were learning, you were trying to learn from them. That's why you did it. That simple pat on the back, when it spreads and people are doing that on an ongoing basis, it just lifts up the leadership and gets them to be at a level that they didn't imagine. And it's just those positive interactions that really accelerate it, I think.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Go ahead, Trevor.
And I was gonna say that's a great tip. And Beth, as you have went out throughout this development and mentorship journey, when you reflect back, or even today, is there a common book or resource that you constantly come back to, that you share with others, that you find incredibly valuable?
In general, or about mentoring?
It could be both.
Okay.
Anything that you would find valuable that you like to share with others?
I'd say in general, there's a book that I've come back to many times because I did make so many moves There's a book called The First 90 Days. And you've probably heard of it. It's just very basic, like how you tackle a new role in the first 90 days. And it's all super general, very kind of process oriented approach to entering a new role and listening first and right, all the basics. But I read and reread that multiple times, and I don't do that with a lot of books, at least reskimmed it. So that's a good one, but I'm always reading new things. I'll just say, like right now I'm reading Brag, which was highly recommended to me, which is all about how to talk about yourself, how to toot your own horn in a nice and respectable way. And then I'm also reading Managing Up at the moment. Those are the two things sitting here on my desk. And then just in terms of podcasts, I could not believe how many things are out there in each individual field. So when I moved into commodities, right, I found podcasts that helped me with that. When I moved into procurement for the first time, I found podcasts on procurement and contract negotiation and just negotiation in general. When I moved into the finance transformation, believe it or not, there are podcasts on finance transformation because I just needed to hear what language people are using. What are the things that are top of mind for leaders in this space? Things like that. So that's my tip on how to find the resources.
That's awesome. Beth, what about, in the last episode too, under Developmentor, I was commenting on the innate goodness of LinkedIn Learning now. Because as leaders, and you did this over the years, right? You'd have a little bit of a training budget, not usually a big line item, but you'd have it in your budget. And then you look at your people and you have to, okay, once a year kind of say, okay, this person's going to do this and they're going to do that. And I'm going to, and then someone comes along and says, I want to go to this, and it's some $1,000 session down in Philadelphia where they're going to meet these stars or something, So, but the beauty of LinkedIn Learning is it's tens of thousands of pre-recorded trainings on all topics, and it costs $240 a year. So I say that's kind of taken the lid off of training for a lot of people, that you can really self-develop even better than, the podcast, I'm with you 100%. But then you can get these little mini formal trainings anytime you want them. You don't have to wait till you sign up for a class and that sort of thing. So did you have some experience with that too, with your teams at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know how adult learners are, right? It's not just to sit and watch that video might be a little painful. Maybe you're not going to get as much out of it if you would with a live leader and a class full of people. So one of the things that I would do kind of on top of the LinkedIn Learning, because I was a founding member of a couple big women's mentoring groups at Hershey, the Women in Supply Chain and then the Women in Finance, and they were about 200 people each. And so we would incorporate those into our curriculum, and it would be like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's the assignment. I want you to watch this training, and then we're going to have a follow-up discussion together as a group, or put it into practice. And or I would give that assignment to somebody else to pick the training and facilitate that discussion with the larger group. So we incorporated it as much as possible. It was great.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's an amazing little mini masterclass for everybody. You can create your own little masterclass journey. And it's just a resource, I think, back on 10 or 20 years ago, if we all had, where we would be today. The goodness of everybody's training journey, it would be doubled or tripled how good you could be.
There's so much good stuff out there, especially for data and analytics. We used it a lot in finance for people who were learning data visualization and data transformation tools like Alteryx or Tableau or Power BI. Lots of good stuff, and they were really elevating their data and analytics game thanks in large part to that.
Yeah, and the other thing I'm finding, and you see it on LinkedIn when you just cruise the feed, you see this person completed this course and they're proud of it and the little certificate pops up. and when they did it, they didn't do it 8 to 5. They squeezed it in on their own personal time because they're committed to being better. And that's the beauty of those courses. You don't have to wait till it's available at work at 11 o'clock on Tuesday the 26th. They can just go do it when they have a little free time in their own lives and move their careers forward. That's what I love about it, the flexibility of it too.
Yeah, I love that too.
So on this topic of developing yourselves and the greater good development. I think we would be remiss, though, Trevor, if I didn't ask the big question. And the big question for Beth, maybe it's the last big one today, would be, being a highly accomplished woman in leadership, what could she help others with on her perspective on the challenges women face in industry and in leadership? So Beth, could you just reflect a little bit on your journey as a woman in leadership?
Yeah, boy, and my journey as a woman in male-dominated fields, for sure. I mean, honestly, I've been quite lucky to work with some incredible men who have been so supportive and super professional, but it's not always the case. So women face a couple things. I mean, number one, sometimes we're the only woman in a room, and there are a lot of people who are listening to this who might be the only, right? They might be the only engineer in a room full of salespeople. They might be the only person of color in a room full of white people. They might be the only woman in a room full of men, right? So there's a lot of the only that you can be. But to be the only woman in the room that's been something that I've dealt with for many, many years. My career is a 30-year career. I started at Hershey in 98, but I started in the connector industry in 94. And I would say maybe 8 years ago, I was in my first meeting with all women. And we looked at each other and we were like, oh my gosh, like we're in a room full of women. This has never happened before. And anyway, I mean, it was amazing, but it was also kind of sad that was the first time that happened. But women and men think differently. And so there really needs to be a critical mass of women in a room, or different thinkers in a room, diversity, before it really starts to change and impact the conversation. So I personally, and a lot of people that I know, work to intentionally strive for that diversity. So that's a struggle. It's not as bad as it used to be. I'd say the other big thing that I struggled with, and that women struggle with, maybe differently than men, is that balance of assertiveness and warmth. And I've been thinking a lot about that, and simultaneously this book, speaking of books, Trevor, called Likeable Badass came out. Okay. And it's written by Allison Fergale. It's new, it's incredible. And it is all about exactly this. It is about being assertive, but also with a level of warmth that allows you to be a likable badass. And it goes for men, and it's written for women, but honestly, it applies to everyone. I can think, and you guys can probably both think of people who don't have that warmth, and they get a reputation that's maybe not what they're striving for with their assertiveness. So that's something that women really have to balance, because you can get a bad reputation if you don't.
Not to interrupt your thought process, but when you said men might be more comfortable with assertiveness and warmth, I immediately thought, no, most of them just forget the warmth part and just do the assertiveness.
No, men need to read the book too. Exactly. For sure.
Well, awesome. Any more on that?
Probably the final one that I guess I would be remiss if I didn't bring up is just the fact that I've dealt with a lot of inappropriate behavior over the years. More so earlier, and probably more so earlier because I didn't have my voice yet. And I don't know. So my advice to every female and to every person listening to this is speak up when you see somebody in a situation and you know that it's not okay, or you hear someone say something and it just turns your stomach. Be the person who says, hey, that's not okay. Like, we don't talk that way at work. This isn't the playground, or this isn't the locker room, or this isn't whatever. We don't talk to people that way at work. And I think I got a lot stronger. Well, I know I did, as I just gained experience and moved up in the ranks. You can be a lot braver when you're a higher level. And I wish I had been braver when I was entry level. But I think we're in a much better place than we used to be, generally speaking. But I would just say, don't underestimate the power that your voice carries, anyone, for all of the listeners when it comes to that.
Yeah, on the inappropriate behavior, Beth, I cringe when I hear someone like you tell me that, right? That the world still does that, right? I mean, we all just cringe. We say, how can this be? Why would someone be inappropriate? And we have to accept it as a fault that is there. And then I would put the challenge out to that first and second level managers, right? Because usually it happens at the first level where you see a lot of it. And those managers need to step up. Like you said, you wished you'd have said, hey, that's inappropriate, which is the ultimate perfect way to have it happen. You take somebody aside and you face to face and say, gee whiz, you said this, that made me feel uncomfortable. Please don't do that. But people are afraid to do that, especially when they're in their first level job. But what I found over the years is those first level managers and second level managers were the ones turning the blind eye. They knew it was going on, but they didn't want to deal with it. They would all think, well, that's HR's problem to deal with that conflict. It's not my problem. And I used to preach there's two HRs, big HR and little HR. And every manager has to be little HR. They have to own it. And those are the ones we need to train up. I don't know what we needed to do, but we need to energize that first and second level leadership community, because they're the ones that can stomp it out. They see it. And they're the ones that at times won't act on it. And then it'll take the pressure off the person that's feeling it when the manager comes in from left field and just nips it in a bud and it's gone, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for telling us that. Those are great pieces of advice. And I love the story about we were at a meeting when it was all women in the room, and and you said the right words, which is, it's sorry it's taken that long.
Yeah.
But I want every woman to know, and every man supporting women in industry and women in leadership, that we've made a lot of progress. We really have. And there are so many accomplished, talented leaders that are women, one on this screen today, that are great icons for women, that are great trailblazers, and that we all need to embrace the fact that it's happening. Of course, it never happens fast enough. But if we all believe in the fact that it's happening and we're making great strides. I like to think of, General Motors, the largest car company in the U.S. and one of the largest in the world, is run by Mary Barra right now. It's a woman. And she came up through engineering, the whole story. So we need to embrace these great stories and really keep encouraging women to step up and step forward so that they really accomplish what they're clearly capable of accomplishing. And this discussion of man versus woman will just fade away. It needs to just fade away. And so thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's really great advice for people to think about.
Sure.
So Trevor, that's what I had for Beth.
Yeah, I have, Beth, I know there's a lot of listeners listening to this that want to know where they can find you online. Before you get into that, though, I want you to tell me a little bit more about your new venture here in step function coaching.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So yeah, when I retired from Hershey, I was thinking a lot about what was next for me, and I read, from the advice of an old professor of mine, a book called From Strength to Strength. And it's all about how in the second half of your life, you really need to start leveraging your wisdom, right? It's time to maybe stop learning new things and start giving back with what you already know. And it was just the perfect time to read that. And a couple people had mentioned that I should get into career coaching because it's kind of just a skill that I naturally had at work, and it was one of my favorite things to do. So I launched this business called Step Function Coaching. Step function, like the mathematical function that looks like a set of stairs. So it's a step function in improvement. And so Step Function Coaching is where I work with mid-level professionals to help them get that job, like Jack said earlier, that they should have had by now. The folks who are maybe not sure why others are passing them by or have just been in the same role for a little too long. and want to get unstuck. And so I give them those insights that I've learned throughout all of my years, especially at the higher levels, like being behind closed doors and knowing those conversations that are happening about organizational design and hiring and the talent that we have and the talent that we want on the organization. I share all of that wisdom with my clients to help them get to the roles that they're looking for. So yeah, everything. My handle is Step Function Coaching on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Instagram has a much more active output. There's daily content there, lots of good free stuff every day for people to check out.
Perfect. And we'll link those in the show notes. And do you have a website for it as well that they can visit?
Yeah, guess what it is? It's stepfunctioncoaching.com. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Not as much activity there. That's really the place that you go to book appointments and get content and resources. But LinkedIn and Instagram are the main places to be.
Perfect. Well, it's a very much needed service, and you're the perfect person to be behind that with everything you've shared today, with your experience, and I'm sure that's going to help a lot of individuals. So if you're listening to this and that sounds like something that you could benefit from, please reach out to Beth or check out her website or her LinkedIn and Instagram. And I personally, Beth, I enjoyed this conversation. I learned myself a lot here, took some notes and jotted some books down as well. And so thank you so much for coming on today, sharing, being open, and for being our first guest.
What an honor. Thank you both. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks, Beth.
Right.
Yeah, it's really been an honor to have you.
Thanks.
Yes. And till next time, guys, we'll see you later.
All right. Take care, everybody. Go lead.